Hello everyone, my name is Holly Clawges and this is my final semester in Valdosta State University's Master of Library and Information Science program. Throughout my studies here at VSU, I've mostly focused on adult services in a public library or prison library setting. This webinar is intended for stakeholders of public libraries and will focus on how they can support ex-offenders in their communities. References will be noted on each slide as well as at the end of the PowerPoint. This webinar will start with an overview of some recent laws affecting Georgians. Then we will look at the typical profile of an ex-offender. We will see what success looks like and define recidivism. We will talk about the information needs of ex-offenders. And then finally, we'll look at some programming examples, suggestions for getting started, and best practices. Let's look at the stats of those with criminal records in Georgia to better understand the breadth of this issue. In 2007, 1 in 13 adults in Georgia were under some form of correctional control, the highest rate of any state. The national average is 1 in 31. Correctional control includes parole, probation, and incarceration. In 2010, 12 to 15% of adult Georgians and 22 to 26% of adult African American Georgians have a felony conviction. So you can begin to see the breadth of the issue here in Georgia. People with criminal records are members of our neighborhoods, families, and communities. These statistics may have improved over the past 10 years due to our increased emphasis on criminal justice reform here in Georgia, but we still have a long way to go. Let's quickly look at two recent laws that affect Georgians with criminal records. The First Step Act of 2018 is federal legislation that was signed into law by President Trump in December 2018 and affects only federal prisoners. There are several components to the full legislation, but I'll just briefly mention those aspects that pertain to our topic here today. The First Step Act allows for prisoners to be released back into their communities after completing certain recidivism reduction programming. It also made some changes to mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines, allowed for some individuals to petition for shorter sentences in connection with the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010, and authorized continuation of a pilot program that allowed elderly and terminally ill prisoners to serve the remainder of their sentences on home confinement. These individuals will be moving back into our communities where our public libraries can directly address their information needs. Georgia's SB 288 or Act 582 or the Second Chance Georgia Act is brand new legislation for Georgia that was signed into law by Governor Kemp on August 5th, 2020, and will go into effect January 1st, 2021. Second Chance Georgia has two primary components. First, it allows for a restriction and sealing of certain misdemeanor convictions from an individual's criminal record if they have been crime-free for 4 years. In addition, those who have received a pardon for certain felony offenses can also petition to have their criminal record restricted and sealed. It's important to note that there are some limitations here like sex crimes, crimes against children, family violence, and DUI. So this will not cover everyone with a conviction. The second component to the Act protects employers who hire individuals with a criminal history who have had their record restricted and sealed. This removes a lot of the barriers employers feel when hiring those with criminal records. Before the pandemic, there was a 3.4% unemployment rate for the state, but close to a 15% unemployment rate for those with criminal records. This component is meant to help counteract those statistics. And while this webinar is not intended to focus on the issue of mass incarceration in the U.S., we can take a moment to acknowledge how mass incarceration has affected so many Georgians. Our focus here is to help understand where the public library fits into this environment and how we can help incorporate those with criminal records back into our communities. If a library's mission includes serving all members of its community, We need to make sure that we're not missing community members who have criminal records. As an aside, it should also be noted that if you have a prison in your county, those inmates are counted as residents of your county during the census. So they should also be included when you think about programming and resources for your community. Let's do a quick profile of the ex-offender, with the caveat, of course, that as with any population, there is a great deal of diversity within the group. But compared with the average American, ex-offenders are less educated, less likely to be gainfully employed, and more likely to have a history of mental illness or substance abuse. There's also quite the social stigma against those with criminal records, especially when it comes to employment opportunities. That stigma has helped to create the high unemployment statistic mentioned earlier. There is this assumption that once an individual serves their sentence, they are then free to live life to the fullest, and they have all the same opportunities as everyone else. And this is a false assumption. We as a society continue to punish ex-offenders long after their sentences have been completed through restrictions on employment, housing, and other community involvement. So what does success for ex-offenders look like? Well, if you ask ex-offenders, one study found that success is defined as having your own place to live, helping family members and others, living free from criminal justice surveillance, persevering through challenges, and living a quote-unquote normal life. But we typically don't ask ex-offenders to define what success looks like for them. Instead, we define success for ex-offenders through the community lens of a recidivism statistic. Recidivism is the tendency of a person convicted of a crime to reoffend. The main issue with the recidivism statistics is that there's not a standard definition of the term. For example, you can include those who have been re-convicted of crimes, or you can include those who have simply been rearrested, and those statistics will look very different. So it's important to understand the underlying definition of whichever statistic you're using for recidivism. Here in Georgia, the Georgia Department of Corrections shows that 28.5% of those with a felony conviction will have another felony conviction within 3 years of release. This doesn't count arrests or misdemeanor convictions. When looking at rearrests, the Bureau of Justice Statistics found that 83% of state prisoners released in 2005 across 30 states were rearrested at least once during the 9 years following their release. So looking at these statistics, you can see that we have ample opportunities for improvement here in Georgia. So how do we as a community public library come together to provide resources that help ex-offenders from reoffending? Well, that's a great question and one that lacks rigorously designed scientific studies. However, there is an emerging what works literature on recidivism programs that suggests that focusing on work training and placement, drug and mental health treatment, and housing assistance have proven to be effective against recidivism. What kinds of information needs do ex-offenders have? Most of the literature regarding public libraries' programming and services for ex-offenders is in the form of trade journal articles or case studies describing specific programs. For example, a 2007 article in Public Libraries magazine noted that anecdotal evidence suggests ex-offenders have information needs regarding housing information, employment information, including resume building, job interview preparation, and appropriate clothing, information on how to find local substance abuse meetings, assistance acquiring identification documents, legal information, especially family law, educational information, including GED courses, community colleges, or English as a second language courses, computer training, and internet skills. These information needs may sound familiar because many of them are like the information needs of the rest of the community, and public libraries already offer programs and services that address many of these needs. The difference lies in the complications of these needs due to a criminal record. For example, it's not only finding housing information, but finding housing that allows those with criminal records to rent. It's not just about finding employment options, but locating businesses who hire those with criminal records and advising people on how to address their criminal record during interviews. So tailoring programming options for those with criminal records may look a little different than programming for the rest of the general public. Let's look now at some successful programming in public libraries for ex-offenders. First, we'll look at some great LibGuide examples and then move on to some successful programming conducted by public libraries specifically for ex-offenders. The New York Public Library has their Connections magazine, which is available online and in print. This guide covers resources for education, housing, financial assistance, physical and mental health, addiction, legal services, employment, and services specifically for immigrants, veterans, people with disabilities, women, older people, LGBTQI+, youth, and parents and caregivers. This is by far the most comprehensive guide I've found and would be a good example to use in creating your own LibGuide. There are a few other online LibGuides that also list resources for ex-offenders. The Library of Congress offers national resources on employment, reentry, and starting a business. The Denver Public Library offers a short list of resources related to employment and includes a section on how employers can benefit from hiring ex-offenders. Other libraries might include a section on ex-offenders in their LibGuide topics. A good example of this is the Davenport Public Library's Career Resources LibGuide, which offers a section dedicated to ex-offenders. So let's look now at a few examples of programming specifically for ex-offenders conducted by public libraries. In 2014, article featured in Public Libraries magazine described the Tiff County Public Library program here in Georgia that partnered with the Tifton Day Reporting Center. The Reporting Center is a non-resident prison alternative for people with drug addictions who have committed nonviolent crimes. And originally, the idea of this partnership was to promote free programming for children to encourage participants to develop and nurture familial relationships. Strong family connections have shown to be important in the reentry process. They quickly realized that it wasn't garnering a significant increase in patron activity, and the library could offer significantly more resources to the participants. So with the approval of the facility director, they started to sign the participants up for library cards at the facility and started talking about additional services the library could offer, such as employment, education, and entertainment resources. Here's what they found. Many of the participants believed a public library is where educated people go to check out books that are not relevant to their lives. Participants were also not likely to read brochures about library services. They needed someone to tell them about the resources available to them in order to spark an interest. Best practices include waiving fines for those who might already have an account, and not noting anywhere in their account that they signed up at the facility. This allowed for a fresh start. Since they started the library card program, they have seen an increase in library visits from participants. Another example of programming is the Denver Public Library's Free to Learn program for women ex-offenders that was conducted in 2011. This program consisted of weekly 2-hour open computer labs for participants to work on 3 key areas: computer and internet skills, job search skills and readiness, and library awareness and understanding. Initially, the program was very structured with a detailed curriculum, but they quickly realized that flexibility was more important, so they ended up offering an open lab time with volunteers and staff available for questions. This worked really well. It allowed the participants to work on their individual tasks as well as help each other emotionally and practically. Participants were set up with an email address, resume, and flash drive, and were also encouraged to have fun online by downloading music to an MP3 player, for example, or connecting with friends and family through Facebook. By creating a safe space specifically targeted to this population, the program was able to diffuse much of the shame that an ex-offender might feel in seeking assistance in a library setting. In 2011, 40 women participated, 26 completed job applications through the program, and 23 attained employment. So let's say you're interested in creating a program for ex-offenders, but you're not sure exactly where to start. It's always best to inquire within your community to see what would be most beneficial for those close to home, but here are a few suggestions for new programs that may be appropriate for your library. Create LibGuides on employment, voting, and housing rights. Not everyone believes in second chances, and ex-offenders may not know their rights when it comes to housing, voting, and employment laws. A legal workshop for information on sealing convictions under the new law that goes into effect January 2021. I think this one offers a huge opportunity for libraries to partner with local law firms to create significant change in the lives of ex-offenders. One final suggestion is to work with ex-offenders on creating their own businesses. Gainful employment after incarceration is a major stumbling block for many ex-offenders, and helping them to develop their own businesses can give them more opportunities to provide for themselves and their families without depending on someone else. An example of this is Gwinnett County Public Library's new program called the New Start Entrepreneurship Incubator. This is a 6-month program to help ex-offenders develop a small business and overcome barriers to professional success. This is a really exciting program, and I cannot wait to hear how it goes. As we near the end of this webinar, I'd like to include the list of best practices for libraries interested in service to ex-offenders. This list was prepared by the Denver Public Library. Make community connections. It's important to make connections with other organizations that serve ex-offenders so that you can boost each other's programs. Your resources are only helpful if people know about them and use them. Make people connections. For people who may have had negative experiences with authority figures and government agencies, developing a positive connection with ex-offenders may help their overall community connection in the long run. Make a special space and time. Setting aside a space only for ex-offenders can help alleviate some of the embarrassment they might feel from having a criminal record. Be flexible. Both of the programs mentioned in this webinar started off with a more structured setup and moved to allow more flexibility. Be willing to change your program to fit the needs as they come up in the moment. Groups are good. A group setting allows for patrons to assist each other and form meaningful relationships. Understand the special issues. These are going to be the heightened information needs that we discussed earlier, such as how to answer the question on the job application about convictions. Encourage fun. This one is self-explanatory. You will have more success if you make things fun. Focus not only on them, but on their families, especially children. Having good familial relationships can help lower recidivism rates. See the people, not the labels. Respond to them as regular patrons, and your programming will be more effective. And finally, snacks are always appreciated. Many ex-offenders may be struggling to obtain basic necessities, and providing a small snack shows them you care and may help them to focus. That is all I have for today. One final suggestion would be for you all to share your experiences with serving ex-offenders in your libraries through peer-reviewed journal articles, trade articles, community blog posts, and professional listservs. Not only does it help get the word out about your library, about how your library is serving this special population, but it's also important to add to the scholarly literature on this topic so that a body of research can be built. I appreciate your time today, and please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or if you'd like to share your experiences. Thank you so much.